So let's just dive right in. This first question is, when are we going to do a Spanish version of Cthulhu Wars? Well, he doesn't specify Cthulhu Wars, but I assume he's talking about Cthulhu Wars. And the answer is, we did. We've done Cthulhu Wars. We published it by Last Level Games was our partner. They did the core game. They released it. And they're going to do a reprint of it at some point, is my understanding, but they've only released it once. So we've done Spanish Cthulhu Wars. It's just that Petersen Games didn't sell it directly. Here's a kind of interesting question. In the likely event, he says, the UK leaves the EU. I don't know how likely that is, but he says it's likely. How do you see this impacting shipping? Will you have them sent from the current EU distributor? Will you possibly endeavor a UK distributor? I don't know what he means there, but I'm assuming get a UK distributor. We do have a UK distributor, actually, too. We use Estevium and Spiral Galaxy. But whether their Brexit fully happens or not, or whatever happens with that, I don't see that impacting shipping hardly at all, because it's not like the UK's relationship to the US was defined by the EU in any way. We shipped stuff before the EU existed, before the Maastricht Treaty in the early 90s, and I'm sure we'll ship stuff to the UK after being a US company. The VAT, I'm sure, will change, and the numbers of the VAT, but that is something I have no idea what the impact would be. So, love the 5th edition book, and I'm looking forward to getting all 4 chapters. Acts, really. Small question, are the plans for future campaigns, adventure modules? Yes. Because the thing about Sandy is that Sandy is a fountain of ideas. And so the big problem with him having a company is that he has way more ideas than he has the means to effectuate those ideas or turn those ideas into products, right? So the role-playing stuff is actually a good... We're expanding more into role-playing. He's always going to still do his board games, but the fact that we're starting to do more and more role-playing stuff is awesome, because what Sandy can do, since he's not a 5th edition player himself, he can write lots and lots of role-playing campaigns and adventures and ideas down in, big design bibles, long documents of just, here's a bunch of stuff for a role-playing adventure. Here's a plot, here's a treatment, whatever. And then give it to a good designer like Matt Corley, Jonah Baumgars, and some people we've been using recently, and they can turn it into the full adventure. And so this allows Sandy to keep being a fount of creativity while being able to do more stuff with that creativity, and also doing his board games. So the answer is yes, we're going to do lots and lots and lots of other campaign adventures. Ghoul Island is just the first. And Ghoul Island wasn't even the first one Sandy wanted. He wanted his first to be Yigsnake Granddaddy, but the designer on that was basically slower than the guy on Ghoul Island, so it became Ghoul Island first. That's really what happened. He wanted Yigsnake Granddaddy first, but Ghoul Island is first, and then we're going to do Yigsnake Granddaddy, a thing called Spawn Dance, a thing called Dark Worlds, and a thing called Have You Seen It? So we have literally 4 more campaign adventures in the midst of development right now. So yeah, Ghoul Island is the tip of the iceberg on that. Plus there's lots of other stuff, lots of other role-playing possibilities we're looking at, like a lot. I wouldn't be surprised if within 2 years, role-playing would be as big as board games for us at Petersen Games. We're really increasing the role-playing side of our company. Next question is about role-playing. Any plans on expanding the hyperspace lore to RPG? Yes, and that's all I'm going to say about that. Actually, that's not all I'm going to say about that. Yes, we want to, but Sandy is not interested in designing an entirely new RPG by himself. So we're actually looking for a potential lead designer for a new role-playing game. So I'll just put it out there publicly. We're totally looking for that. Obviously, a role-playing game is usually not designed by just one person, but it'll have like one author, one lead designer, lead writer, lead developer, or whatever. We're looking for that one person because that's going to be too much time for Sandy. He has too much other stuff to do. So hyperspace RPG is a possibility. That's all it is right now. It's not a guaranteed, it's not a promise, it's not a sure thing. But the question was, are we doing hyperspace RPG stuff? And the answer is maybe. Luke Mirthwaite says, how successful do you think the hyperspace test pilot scheme was? Any plans to do that sort of thing again? I think it was very successful for hyperspace. but I don't know if we're going to do it again. So just because something is successful doesn't always mean we should repeat it, because it does depend on the product, the marketing strategy. It depends on a lot of factors, right? It's kind of like Hollywood should learn that lesson, right? Just because a movie is successful doesn't mean every movie after should exactly be that thing. Hollywood will always say, this was successful, so we'll exactly copy it until it's done to death and everybody hates it. I mean, stuff that we do that are successful, we'll try to repeat that success. But the test pilot, while a good idea for hyperspace, a good idea, the main problem with that is it did cost a lot of money, and it's hard to gauge how much it helped the Kickstarter. And so when you're doing marketing, when you're doing advanced marketing and spending money on marketing and ads and stuff like this, it's always good to know what your return on investment is. And it was really hard to gauge the return on investment, which required a bunch of people to play the game with friends and give a shout out on social media, because although we can track some of it, we can't track all of it. So we rather stick with things where the data is more clear on if we're getting our money's worth for the marketing. So that, despite the fact that I called it a success. So maybe it wasn't a success. But I still think it helped hyperspace, I'll put it that way. I think the test pilot was successful. It's just so hard to track the ROI that we can't be sure it was successful in a business sense, right? The next question is, will you include stretch goals in your future campaigns? Depends on the campaign. I mean, we haven't used them for a lot of projects. The day of stretch goals might be over. I mean, not like no one will ever use stretch goals again in any project, but I think stretch goals were a great innovation, a brilliant idea by whatever creator did them first. And we've used them. Lots of project creators have used them. And if you're a small project creator and therefore the stretch goals are more legitimate, I don't want to use that word. The stretch goals are more truly stretch goals in the sense that if they don't get the funding, they just can't do it, then that's a good thing. But we don't have that issue anymore. Like, we already plan everything from the beginning. So stretch goals are very rarely true stretch goals for us, which is part of the reason we don't do them anymore. It's like, why do something that's a farce? We don't want to do something that's not real, you know? So an example of a true stretch goal, one of the most recent ones for us would have been in Planet Apocalypse, when we did Cthulhu, the Great Cthulhu and the Spider Mastermind at the very end of the project. Those were real because we didn't plan for them in advance. And we're like, well, what would it take for us to do this? How much money, how much time and effort and energy? And we did those stretch goals. In fact, one of them was even met after the campaign was over in the Pledge Manager. We reached enough in the Pledge Manager to do the Spider Mastermind, I think it was. So those were true stretch goals. But all the other stretch goals in Planet Apocalypse before that point were like planned out. We already had designed them. We already Sandy had already done all the design work on them, had play tested them, had done the art, the sculpting, the layout, everything was done. So they were stretch goals only in the sense that, you know, it's more feasible for us to include them in the product if we have more people buying the product, lowering our, you know, cost of goods sold with economies of scale. So yeah, they're still stretch goals financially, but not stretch goals at a project level, if that makes sense. Like, we were going to do them pretty much. I guess the difference would be, are we going to include them in the product or have them be an add-on? Like, that's what you would do if you have a stretch goal planned out and you can't get enough funding for it. You can just add it to be an add-on, because then it makes financial sense, right? So I guess we could do that. But, and sorry, I'm dwelling on this question. I just don't see us using stretch goals. Maybe there'll be a project where it will make sense for us, but I don't know. Okay, with the recent tariff put in place by the Trump administration, how do you plan on handling Demon Sultan and Cataclysm, assuming that the tariff is still in effect when they would land here in the U.S.? So if there's a tariff, then we'll have to pay it. That's like the bottom line. But since we've already charged you guys shipping and closed the Pledge Manager for those and so forth, I mean, we're not going to charge you. We'll just eat that cost. It's one of those things, right? It's not abnormal for us to eat the cost in the world of shipping anyway, which I'll get to in another question. So if the tariff is still here and it seems like it's going to be here for a while and it's just, here's the tariff and it's going on, then obviously game prices are going to have to rise. Something will have to change. Whether it's the game price has to rise a little bit or the shipping price, something will have to change because it's, in business and economics, when you change an input, you change an output. That's just how it is. So something will change because the tariffs aren't that insignificant. But they're not as significant as the original thing that was announced at the beginning of the summer. So we'll see. Sandy has a painting of Cthulhu hanging in his home. Cthulhu has big head and large eyes. I think it was a gift to him. I've seen this in the background of 1 to 2 of Sandy's posts. Any chance a poster could be made of this painting, or does the artist sell prints? That was done by Tom Sullivan, who's a personal friend of Sandy's, did a lot of art for Cthulhu, for Call of Cthulhu and Chaosium back in the 80s, and who also was the guy who did like the original Sam Raimi film, The Evil Dead, in the early 80s, like the book of the Necronomicon. He did that. And then he painted this giant thing of Cthulhu for Sandy. And I think Tom sells, you can probably Google it, Tom Sullivan, I think sells the prints of it. We don't. It's not our piece of art. It's Sandy's. He has the original. But it's just Tom Sullivan's art. Next question. I am excited for Startropolis and wanted to know if you have more expansions planned. Also, another games based on the hyperspace universe. All right, so we already have an expansion for Cthulhu Wars. We already have an expansion for Startropolis, the Nova Box. That's more a question for Tony and Jeff, who designed that game, and I bet you they would love to do more expansions. Let's see how it does in the marketplace first, because it already has an expansion, and it's a small game. So let's see. For hyperspace, Sandy is actually, is probably a secret surprise. Sandy is designing 2 games currently in early stages, both not hyperspace, but both set in the hyperspace universe, in the hyperspace IP. They're both very different, and I probably shouldn't say much about them because they are really early in, we haven't announced them. Well, we might have announced one to some fans, small cadres of super close fans type of a thing, but we've generally announced none of them, and one of them is so new that I only found out about it last Thursday because Sandy said, "Arthur, I designed a new game. Here." I was like, what? It was completely out of the blue. And then I got to play it on Sunday, and it's really good. And it's totally new, and like everything else Sandy was supposed to be designing in our project schedule, we have like 25 active projects. And he's like, "Arthur, here's a new one." I'm like, but it's fun. So there should be a penguin in every Petersen Games product. No, here's the secret. Every Petersen Games product, except for 3, has the yellow sign somewhere in it. Probably should have been a key secret that the yellow sign is even somewhere on every one of our products except for 3, but you're here watching, so you get to know this. Arthur, what is your favorite race in hyperspace and why? Okay, the Mendiku or the Broodmasters probably. But I would say Skith and Venge are close. So there's 4. There's like my 4 top ones for sure. Mendiku, Broodmaster, Skith, Venge. And I know 3 of those are in the core game. But the main reason I like them is for the theme and the background. Those 4 aliens, to me, are by far the most interesting aliens that Sandy developed. The ideas behind them, like the fact that the Mendiku aren't even intelligent. They're just instinct. It's just instinct, but they're able to do things that a fully intelligent spacefaring race can do. The Broodmasters are super awesome. Their ecology, the way they live. Obviously, the Skith is one of the most interesting ideas for any sci-fi thing ever. That there is one Skith, and yet there's billions of them. It's just an extrapolation. What I think Sandy is brilliant at is not necessarily developing ideas from whole cloth, although sometimes he does that, but by taking an idea and extrapolating it to the coolest end result. Like the idea of fuging is not a new idea in science fiction, but I've never encountered the idea of, if fuging can be a thing, what if there's an entity that there's one of him because he can because it can fugue, and so there's billions of it. So it's a race from our perspective, but it's one individual, and what are the implications? Just so awesome. From a gameplay standpoint, all 4 of those are good. but I would probably add in, I love the fungi. I love the Zep's egg. I like there's too many good races to play. The Glazok Talker fun. I like to play a lot of the races. So, and I haven't played all the hyperspace races. So maybe my favorite is, I'll play one day and it'll be my favorite. Next question. Hi, Arthur. Thanks for hosting this town hall. You've mentioned growth in the company several times these past few months. What areas do you still need for more resources or new positions? 100% art. Our art is our main pain point. I know from a customer standpoint, it's customer service, and that is true, but that's being actively resolved. I mean, we tripled our customer support team in the past few weeks, and although it takes a while to train them and get them really going full steam ahead, that is happening. So it's not something to now address, if that makes sense. But art is. We are actively looking for more artists. We have candidates we're looking at for illustrators. We are growing our art team for sure. Also, we might be growing like our graphic design side of our art team as well, besides illustration. Basically our art load and our art bandwidth don't match. We need to increase our art bandwidth, our ability to do art more and faster. So that's like our pain point. Our pain point is art. I don't see other areas really needing growth in the near future, but I would be surprised if within a year or two our art team was not a lot bigger, because it's growing right now. Because we're doing more games. I'm looking forward to novels, comics set in the hyperspace universe. Let's have full chronicles of Aurora Ultraviolet Adventures, please. Oh, trust me, hyperspace is possibly my favorite IP, maybe even eclipsing Cthulhu. I mean, I love Cthulhu stuff, and the Cthulhu mythos, being the son of Sandy. But I super love outer space, space opera, sci-fi, more leaning to the hard sci-fi, but I love the hyperspace IP. I love it more than Planet Apocalypse, for sure, as an IP. So I hope there's lots of novels and comics set in the hyperspace universe. And there's novels coming. There's a trilogy of novels coming for hyperspace. That's how much we want to go into here's things you can read, fiction you can read, That's the end of the questions. End it anticlimactically. I will sign off and tell you thank you so much for being here. Thank you so much for listening. Thank you for your questions. All right. It's been fun.